black billionaire harassed by cop, but her identity leaves the officer in shock. Have you ever witnessed a moment so shocking, so full of injustice and raw emotion, that it leaves you questioning everything? Today's story starts with a routine traffic stop on a sunny afternoon in Beverly Hills. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? But appearances can be deceiving. Our protagonist, a poised black woman behind the wheel of a sleek midnight blue Mercedes, becomes the target of an officer's unwarranted aggression. Little does he know she's no ordinary citizen. As tensions escalate, an astonishing revelation lies just around the corner, one that will flip the officer's world upside down and leave you speechless. Stay tuned. It all started with a dream, an unshakable dream etched into the mind of a determined young girl named Kendra Wellington. Growing up in the south side of Chicago, Kendra's world was a tapestry of grit, perseverance, and unwavering hope. The cramped two-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother faced the brunt of the city's harsh winters. The paint on the walls was chipped, the heating system barely functioned, and the plumbing often gave out at the worst times. Yet in spite of all that, Kendra's mother always found a way to maintain a sense of home. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, homemade posters of positive affirmations on the wall. "Believe in yourself," one read. "Your dreams matter," read another. From a very early age, Kendra could feel the weight of society's expectations pressing down on her. She was expected to be tough, street-smart, and realistic about her future. Many of her friends succumbed to cynicism as soon as they realized the stark socio-economic disparities that shadowed them. But not Kendra. She had a fire inside her, a longing to transcend these limiting boundaries and define her own destiny. A battered second-hand library card became her passport to an entirely new universe, one where she could immerse herself in biographies of trailblazers like Madam C.J. Walker, Harriet Tubman, and Katherine Johnson. At the age of 10, Kendra was introduced to a local community center program called Future Engineers of America. The sign caught her eye one day as she passed by on her way home from school. It promised lessons in robotics, coding, and leadership. The program cost a small tuition fee, but the coordinator took one look at Kendra's bright, inquisitive eyes and admitted her on a scholarship. Every day after school, she devoured knowledge about circuit boards, programming languages, and the basics of project management. By 13, she was creating small robots out of spare parts. By 16, she was entering local robotics competitions, and by 18, she had won a full academic scholarship to Stanford University. Kendra's mother, proud yet anxious, worked multiple shifts as a nurse's aide to support her daughter's fledgling ambitions. She'd often say, "Baby, the world's going to look at you and see your skin first. Don't let that stop you. Let your work speak for you." Those words became Kendra's guiding principle. She excelled academically at Stanford, majoring in computer science and dabbling in entrepreneurial clubs on campus. Before she even graduated, she landed a prestigious internship with Google, where she impressed a group of venture capitalists, many from well-known firms in Silicon Valley, with her startup idea, a cutting-edge communication platform to streamline remote work collaboration. College wasn't just about academics and networking for Kendra. She wanted to prove she had every right to be there. With the wind in her sails from the success of her internship, she co-founded a startup during her junior year. The platform, known as SynergyLink, quickly gained traction because it was launched at a time when remote work was skyrocketing in popularity. She secured early seed funding from respected investors, including Sequoia Capital, and the platform soared to success within months of its beta launch. By the time she was a senior, SynergyLink was on the brink of a full-scale public release, but tragedy struck. Her mother fell gravely ill with a sudden heart condition. Despite her mother's hospital bills looming, Kendra remained resolute. She juggled her classes, her startup responsibilities, and the emotional roller coaster of hospital visits. Her mother, sensing the stress Kendra was under, once told her, "Don't you let my struggles weigh you down. If you're building something special, you go out and change the world." The emotional toll was massive, but Kendra soldiered on. She took a brief hiatus from Stanford to care for her mother, who eventually passed away in a quiet hospital room at dawn, a moment that etched itself permanently in Kendra's heart. Devastated yet inspired by her mother's courage and encouragement, Kendra returned to Stanford. She graduated with honors, dedicating her capstone project to her mother's memory. Her grit and intellect did not go unnoticed. Upon graduation, SynergyLink launched publicly, and thanks to the pandemic-induced shift to remote work, it expanded at an explosive rate. Within a year, it became a household name in corporate circles, offering an intuitive platform that integrated video conferencing, file sharing, and real-time project collaboration in a single interface. By the time Kendra turned 26, she was featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 list. She continued to innovate, acquiring smaller tech companies that aligned with her vision of a fully integrated remote work ecosystem. Before long, SynergyLink branched out internationally, attracting multi-million-dollar investments, culminating in a highly publicized IPO. By the age of 32, Kendra's net worth soared past the billion-dollar mark, a monumental achievement she herself found surreal. But Kendra never forgot her roots or the circumstances of her upbringing. As soon as SynergyLink stabilized, she launched the Wellington Foundation, a philanthropic organization focused on bridging technological gaps in underprivileged communities, especially communities of color. One of its major initiatives was to set up free coding boot camps and scholarship funds in the very neighborhoods Kendra came from. Like the South Side of Chicago, she also sponsored up-and-coming entrepreneurs, predominantly women of color, aiming to provide them with the resources and mentorship she had struggled to find in her youth. Yet despite her financial success and philanthropic accolades, Kendra still felt that society often saw her as just another black woman. She could feel the eyes on her whenever she walked into an upscale restaurant or a corporate boardroom. "Prove you deserve to be here." Those unspoken words loomed above her. She did prove it, over and over again, but deep down, it stung. She wanted to be recognized for her intellect, her hard work, and her accomplishments, rather than the color of her skin. Little did she know that an encounter in her near future would throw her world into upheaval. It was an encounter that would test her patience, her resolve, and her unwavering optimism. An encounter that would be caught on camera for the world to see, one that would lay bare the latent prejudices still rampant in society, no matter how many billions she had in her bank account. Fast forward to the present. Kendra was now 35 years old, with a calm confidence that radiated in every step she took. Having relocated her home base from Silicon Valley to Los Angeles, she found herself drawn to the unique energy of Southern California. The sunshine, the entrepreneurial vibe, and the philanthropic opportunities all called her name. She purchased a sprawling estate in the hills above Beverly Hills, an architectural marvel with sleek glass walls, minimalist designs, and eco-friendly features like solar panels and vertical gardens. Her day-to-day schedule was jam-packed. Investor meetings, philanthropic events, board appointments, and speaking engagements at tech conferences worldwide. She had a dedicated staff who managed her daily life, scheduling appointments, maintaining her home, and handling basic errands. Yet Kendra insisted on driving herself whenever she could. It was one of the few slices of normalcy she craved. On this particular day, she was driving alone in her brand-new midnight blue Mercedes S-Class. The car was her guilty pleasure, a melding of luxury and technology with self-driving features, plush leather seats, and a crystal-clear surround sound system. She had a meeting with the head of a major film studio to discuss a potential partnership that could revolutionize remote content creation. Running just a bit late due to an impromptu phone call with her CFO, she navigated the winding roads of Beverly Hills with practiced ease. The late afternoon sun glinted off her windshield, and the palm trees along the roads cast long shadows across the immaculate streets. Kendra loved how the city's aesthetic seamlessly blended manicured lawns with luxurious boutiques. She would occasionally roll down her window, letting the cool Californian breeze ruffle the edges of her jacket and softly brush her face. Her phone pinged with a notification from her assistant. "Don't forget your dinner with the Wellington Foundation donors at 8 p.m. Hope everything's going smoothly." Kendra took a quick glance at the digital display on her dashboard. She smiled. It was the kind of day she thrived on, productive, purposeful, and filled with opportunities to make an impact. And then, out of nowhere, she saw flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. At first, she thought the police cruiser was trying to get around her, perhaps on its way to an emergency. But when she slowed down and pulled to the side, the cruiser did the same. She frowned, her heart picking up pace. Why would they be pulling her over? She checked her speedometer. She wasn't speeding. Her registration and insurance were up to date. Maybe her taillight was out. She hadn't noticed any issues with the car. She quickly composed herself, recalling her mother's countless admonitions about dealing with law enforcement. Don't make any sudden moves, keep your hands visible, be respectful, and remember your worth. Despite her philanthropic achievements, her business empire, and her top-notch legal team, a part of her would always be the little girl from Chicago's South Side who knew that interactions with the police could be fraught with peril. As she lowered her window, an officer approached, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut. His uniform was crisp, his posture rigid. His face was set in a stern expression. "License and registration," he barked, not even bothering with a greeting. Kendra provided him with a polite nod. "Good afternoon, officer," she replied, her voice calm. She handed over her driver's license and the car's registration. He looked at her license, did a double take, and peered inside the car. "Is this your vehicle?" he asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "Yes, officer, it is," Kendra said patiently. She felt a spike of unease. She wondered if he was questioning the ownership because he couldn't fathom a black woman driving such a luxury car. "Wait here," he said curtly, walking back to his cruiser, license and registration in hand. Kendra took a measured breath. She reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong, that she was fully within her rights. Yet her heart hammered in her chest. She texted her assistant with a quick note. "Running late. Pulled over by the cops for some reason. Keep you posted." Minutes stretched on, and Kendra watched in her side mirror as the officer seemed to be talking into his radio. Another squad car pulled up. 2 more officers joined the first one. Her anxiety rose. Why would they need backup for a simple traffic stop? The presence of multiple officers often heightened the tension. Finally, the first officer returned, accompanied by a second officer, a slightly shorter but equally stern-looking woman. The first officer leaned down to Kendra's window. "Ma'am, please step out of the vehicle," he demanded. A wave of apprehension washed over Kendra. "May I ask why, officer?" she said carefully. His jaw clenched. "I said step out of the vehicle," he repeated, ignoring her question. Kendra obliged. She opened the door, making sure her hands were visible. She stood on the side of the road, the late afternoon sun beating down on her. Cars occasionally passed by, curious drivers rubbernecking. Some pointed, some slowed down. She couldn't help feeling self-conscious, a swirl of fear mixed with indignation threatening to undermine her composure. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood," the second officer ordered, stepping forward with cuffs at the ready. Kendra's heart pounded. She tried to maintain her calm. "Officer, with all due respect, can you please explain what's going on?" "We got a report of a stolen vehicle matching this description," the first officer said tersely. "We are going to have to verify the ownership." Stolen vehicle. Kendra knew that was impossible. The car's registration was under her name, and the VIN would match. This had to be some kind of mix-up, or something more nefarious. She complied, but spoke in a level voice. "My vehicle is not stolen. My registration and insurance are current. My name is on the documents." The female officer stepped in front of Kendra, searching her pockets. She pulled out Kendra's phone, placing it on the hood. There was a moment of tension as the officer's gaze flicked to Kendra's Apple Watch, a glint of annoyance in her eyes, as if she were scanning the device for contraband. Standing on the side of the road, feeling the cold metal of the car's hood under her palms, Kendra couldn't help but recall her mother's warning. In that moment, no amount of money or status could shield her from the vulnerability she felt. She forced herself to remain steady, her eyes fixed on the reflection of the sky in the car's glossy paint. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. She needed to remain calm. A second patrol car arrived, and things escalated swiftly. The first officer demanded to see if there were any weapons or contraband in the car. Kendra watched as one of the new arrivals, an officer with a tense face, started to rifle through her glove compartment and center console. She felt a surge of anger. This was humiliating, especially in broad daylight, in an affluent neighborhood where she was more accustomed to being the honoree at fundraisers than a suspect on the sidewalk. She told herself that the truth would prevail as soon as they confirmed her identity and verified her registration. But the officers seemed oddly unhurried. They moved with a calculated arrogance that suggested they enjoyed the power dynamic of the situation. Kendra tried to catch the eye of a passerby, but people either moved on or took out their phones to discreetly film from a distance. At length, the officers began to discuss among themselves. The female officer handed back Kendra's phone. As Kendra lowered her hands from the hood, the first officer spoke in a mocking tone. "We're running the VIN now. If it comes back stolen, you're going downtown." Kendra's voice quivered slightly despite her best efforts. "Officer, as I've told you, this is my car. I am more than willing to provide whatever information you need. If you'd like, I can show you the electronic purchase receipt from the dealership, Mercedes of Beverly Hills." "She's got all the lines rehearsed," the first officer muttered to his partner. Kendra felt her anger flare, but she steadied herself, remembering the stakes. She had never felt so powerless in her adult life. She was a billionaire, an innovator, a philanthropist, and here she was, treated like a criminal without cause. She thought of her mother, of all the lessons in pride and self-control. She steeled her resolve, swallowing the bitterness that rose in her throat. Officer Timothy Barlow was a 15-year veteran of the Beverly Hills Police Department. He prided himself on being a by-the-book lawman, someone who believed in law and order above all else. On the surface, he appeared to be a professional cop who took pride in his duty. But if you dug deeper, you'd find layers of resentment, unacknowledged biases, and a need for control that had grown stronger over the years. Barlow was never a man to question his own instincts. He had a tendency to see threats where there were none, especially if those threats came in a package that didn't fit his narrow view of belonging. Throughout his career, he had been the subject of several internal complaints. Most never saw the light of day because of the strong police union and bureaucratic red tape. One complaint had come from a black family, claiming Barlow had used unnecessary force during a routine stop. Another originated from a Latino teenager who accused Barlow of racial slurs. Each time, Barlow had skillfully defended himself, often pointing to his otherwise spotless record, commendations for bravery, a low crime rate on his patrol route, and the complaints were quietly dismissed or settled out of court. On this particular afternoon, Barlow was heading to a cafe to grab a quick bite before his shift ended. He spotted the midnight blue Mercedes, and something about it didn't sit right with him. He claimed he saw it swerve slightly, which gave him probable cause to initiate a stop. But truthfully, a deeper, more insidious part of him felt suspicious just because he saw a young black woman behind the wheel of an expensive car. Calling for backup was his standard protocol whenever he felt off about a situation. Over the years, he had cultivated enough respect or fear in his colleagues that they rarely questioned his instincts, even if they never witnessed any real reason for alarm. They arrived, seeing only a scenario Barlow framed as a potentially stolen vehicle. None of them wanted to question the senior officer's narrative in front of a suspect. As they rummaged through the Mercedes, Barlow felt a smug satisfaction. "She's probably some upstart," he thought. "Maybe some mistress of a big shot or a gold digger. No way she earned this car on her own." The possibility that she might be wealthy or an accomplished professional never crossed his mind. He believed wholeheartedly in a social order. If you looked a certain way, you belonged in certain neighborhoods and behind the wheel of certain cars. If you didn't, you were immediately suspect. As the VIN check took an unusually long time, due to a technical glitch in the system, Barlow relished the control he had in the moment. The glare of the California sun, the hum of passing traffic, and the curious stares from onlookers didn't bother him. He thrived on tension, feeding on it as if it were a confirmation of his authority. Beneath the confident facade, though, Barlow was battling personal demons. His teenage daughter had recently been accepted into UCLA, but he was struggling to pay tuition. His ex-wife, tired of his anger issues and controlling behavior, had left him. The house they once shared was sold, and the child support checks took a significant chunk out of his paycheck. Over the years, his frustrations had grown, seeking easy targets, mostly people he believed couldn't push back effectively. Barlow saw Kendra as just another unsuspecting perp who wouldn't be able to fight him in court, but he was terribly, terribly wrong. After what felt like an eternity, Barlow approached Kendra again. By now she was standing on the curb, arms folded across her chest, in a stance that tried to project calm control, but which the officers read as defiance. Barlow shoved her license back into her hands. "We're still waiting to confirm the VIN," he said, though he knew that any moment the system would come back, proving the car was not stolen. Kendra took her license. "Officer, I've already explained. This vehicle belongs to me. If you need further confirmation, I can log into my Mercedes app." Barlow cut her off with a raised hand. "Ma'am, you're not helping your case by interrupting me." Kendra bristled, but suppressed her frustration. "I'm trying to help clarify." Barlow stared her down, his eyes reflecting a deep-seated suspicion. "We don't need your clarifications right now. We just need you to comply." At that moment, a black SUV pulled up behind the row of patrol cars. Out stepped a tall man in a navy blue suit with a crisp white shirt, Malik Anderson, Kendra's longtime friend and personal attorney, having rushed over as soon as Kendra's assistant called him. Malik approached the scene calmly, his posture radiating professionalism. One of the officers held up a hand. "Sir, please step back." Malik reached into his inner pocket. "I am Missy Wellington's attorney," he said, pulling out his business card and identification. "Is there a problem here?" Barlow's gaze flicked from Malik to Kendra. His jaw tightened. "We're handling a report of a potentially stolen vehicle. We don't need you interfering, Counselor." Malik held his ground. "Officer, this is Kendra Wellington, the CEO of Synergy Link and founder of the Wellington Foundation. This car is hers. We can provide immediate proof." A flicker of confusion flashed across Barlow's face. He had heard the name Synergy Link somewhere. His daughter had used a platform for a remote internship. But he quickly masked his confusion. He refused to back down. Malik pressed on, his tone civil but firm. "If there is any doubt, I suggest you allow us to show you the documents. Otherwise, you're unlawfully detaining my client." Just then, the dispatcher's voice crackled through the police radio. Barlow stepped away to answer. Kendra and Malik exchanged relieved glances. They overheard snippets of the dispatcher's words: vehicle, registered, not stolen, no warrants. Barlow's face fell into a dark scowl. He returned to Kendra, stony-faced. "The VIN checks out," he muttered, as if the news inconvenienced him. "You're free to go." Kendra's relief was overshadowed by the sting of what had just transpired. She felt an unspoken sense of violation, as if she had been singled out purely for existing in this space. She wanted an apology, some acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But Barlow offered none. As Kendra prepared to get back into her car, Barlow hovered. "You might want to be more careful out here," he said in a tone that implied a threat rather than advice. "Watch your driving." Malik, outraged, stepped in. "Officer, are you insinuating Mrs. Wellington was driving recklessly because we have dashcam footage from her vehicle that says otherwise. Barlow's eyes flashed dangerously. I said she's free to go. Are we done here? Kendra couldn't contain her frustration any longer. She stepped close enough that she could lock eyes with Barlow. No, we're not done, she said quietly. Next time you see a black woman in a nice car, try not to assume it's stolen. Her words hung in the air, and the passers-by who had gathered started murmuring in agreement. One woman took out her phone and openly recorded Barlow, capturing the tension of the moment. Barlow's face reddened. I don't need a lecture from you, he retorted. Malik placed a calming hand on Kendra's arm. Let's go, he said softly. We'll handle this the right way. Kendra turned and got into her car, her heart pounding. She wanted to drive off and forget this humiliating event, but she also knew that change only came from confronting injustice. She resolved to take action, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been through similar experiences without the resources or platform to fight back. Little did they know, a cell phone video from one of the onlookers was already gaining traction on social media. Within hours, it would spark public outrage, setting off a chain of events that would put Officer Barlow under the national spotlight and highlight a deeper conversation about racial profiling and power abuse. That evening, Kendra arrived late to her Wellington Foundation donor dinner, her mood significantly dampened by the day's events. She wore a brave face, smiling and shaking hands with potential donors, giving a brief speech about the Foundation's new initiatives. But beneath her polished exterior, she was seething. Her mind replayed the incident over and over, the contempt in Barlow's eyes, his refusal to consider she might be a law-abiding citizen. During dessert, she received a text from Malik. It was a link to a Twitter video captioned, "Wealthy black woman harassed by Beverly Hills cop. Racial profiling?" The video had been posted just an hour ago and already had tens of thousands of retweets. Kendra's heart hammered as she watched a shaky cell phone recording of the incident, capturing the moment she was made to stand by her car, arms pressed to the hood as the officers searched her vehicle. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Anger, shame, a pang of fear that this video would overshadow her philanthropic work. Would this define her public image now, a victim of police profiling rather than a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist? But then she saw the comments flooding in. This is unacceptable. I can't believe they treated her like that. Sue the department. Stand with Kendra. That cop should be fired. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Many recognized her name. Some remembered her from tech conferences, others from her philanthropic efforts. Suddenly, Kendra was at the epicenter of a viral movement, with hashtags calling out police misconduct. She glanced at the donors and board members around the table, most of whom had also seen the video by now. She saw empathy in their eyes and a collective sense of shock. That night, as she returned to her estate, she felt a surge of determination. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment to confront the issue head-on. She wasn't just an individual who'd been harassed, she was a symbol now. She had the resources, the connections, and the personal will to fight. And if she didn't stand up, who would? The morning after the incident, Kendra woke up to a flood of emails, texts, and social media notifications. Her name was trending on Twitter, @Kendra Wellington. Major news outlets, including CNN and the New York Times, had run segments on the video. By noon, Kendra's PR team had fielded dozens of interview requests, and the Beverly Hills Police Department was under intense scrutiny. She convened a crisis meeting with her personal attorney, Malik, her PR strategist, Sandra Wu, and 2 board members of the Wellington Foundation who had a background in law and civil rights advocacy. They gathered in the glass-walled conference room of Kendra's home, the Los Angeles skyline visible in the distance. Malik spoke first. "We have a strong civil case here. Unlawful detention, racial profiling, emotional distress. The video is clear. We also have your dashcam footage. The question is, do you want to press charges, or do we go through some sort of community mediation approach? Sandra Wu, the PR strategist, chimed in. The public is on your side right now. The emotional narrative is strong. A successful black female entrepreneur being harassed by the police for no good reason. If we handle this correctly, you can use this momentum to advocate for meaningful policy changes. Kendra pressed her lips together in thought. This is bigger than me. I'm okay personally. My life will go on regardless, but there are countless people who go through this every day without the means to fight back. I want to use this moment to spark real change. She paused, looking around the room. I'm leaning toward legal action, but not for the sake of revenge or a big settlement. I want accountability. I want reforms. If we sue, it should be in a way that demands procedural overhauls in the department. Dash cams, body cams, mandatory racial bias training, the works. One of the board members, a civil rights lawyer named Tamara Bailey, nodded vigorously. That's an excellent strategy. We can push for a consent decree, much like what's been done in other departments. It's not just about punishing Officer Barlow, it's about changing the culture that allows his behavior to flourish. Malik, scribbling notes, added, we also need to consider the personal dimension. This Officer Barlow has a record of questionable behavior. If we bring that to light, the department might be forced to take more immediate action. Kendra let out a slow breath. Fine, let's proceed with a civil lawsuit. But let's also open a channel for dialogue. I want to meet with the police chief. I want to show them that we're willing to work towards solutions, but only if they're willing to address the root issues. That afternoon, Kendra posted a brief statement on her social media platforms, expressing gratitude for the outpouring of support and affirming her commitment to seek meaningful reforms. The response was overwhelming. Likes, shares, and supportive comments flooded in. She began receiving messages from individuals across the country, many sharing their own stories of unjust treatment at the hands of law enforcement. Meanwhile, the Beverly Hills Police Department released its own statement, claiming they were looking into the matter and placing Officer Barlow on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. But that was only the beginning. Kendra's lawsuit quickly gained traction, with national civil rights organizations like the NAACP and the ACLU offering support. Protests formed in front of the Beverly Hills Police Department building, calling for Barlow's termination and broader reforms. Kendra's philanthropic colleagues, as well as a growing list of celebrities, amplified the cause. At first, Barlow went to ground, refusing all interview requests. But as the pressure mounted, rumors swirled that he was seeking legal counsel to defend himself, possibly claiming emotional distress or defamation for how the video was interpreted by the public. A week later, Kendra found herself in a city council meeting that was open to the public, a forum for community members to voice grievances and for public officials to respond. The meeting was crowded. Journalists, activists, residents, and concerned citizens filled every seat, with many more lining the walls. The tension was palpable. Kendra sat in the front row beside Malik and Tamara. On the dais sat the police chief, the mayor, and various council members. A microphone stood at the center of the room for public comments. The mayor, a polished woman in a tailored suit, called the session to order and invited Kendra to speak first, given her role in the incident that ignited the debate. Kendra approached the microphone, her composure betraying only the smallest tremor. She began, "My name is Kendra Wellington. I'm a resident of Los Angeles, a business owner, and the founder of the Wellington Foundation." Her voice was clear, carrying a quiet power that demanded attention. She recounted the incident step by step, maintaining a calm tone but allowing her emotions to show when appropriate, especially when describing the humiliation she felt. Then she pivoted to the broader issue. "This isn't just about me. I have the privilege of resources and visibility, but there are thousands of people who experience similar or worse treatment every day, and their stories never see the light of day. This culture of guilty until proven innocent, especially toward people of color, has to stop. I stand here today not just for myself, but for all those who can't." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. Even the chief of police, an older man with salt and pepper hair and a stern expression, seemed introspective. Kendra concluded, "I'm not here to vilify all law enforcement. We need our police officers. But we also need accountability, transparency, and a willingness to confront implicit and explicit biases. I urge the City Council and the Police Department to take this moment to institute real reforms. Let's set an example for the rest of the country." When she finished, the room erupted in applause. The mayor thanked her and invited others to speak. Several people from the community came forward, sharing their own encounters of profiling or harassment by the Beverly Hills Police. Others thanked Kendra for standing up. Then the police chief had his turn. He acknowledged the seriousness of the incident and stated that an internal investigation was ongoing. "We recognize that changes need to be made," he said, though his words were carefully chosen and somewhat guarded. After the meeting, Kendra was approached by reporters, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward. She gave a brief statement, reiterating her commitment to positive and lasting change. Little did she know, events were already in motion that would bring her face to face with Officer Barlow again. A face-to-face encounter that would be more dramatic, more unpredictable, and potentially life-altering for him and for her. A few days later, Kendra received an unexpected phone call. The number was from a local hospital in Beverly Hills. The voice on the other end was hesitant. "Mrs. Wellington, I'm calling regarding Officer Timothy Barlow. He's asked to speak with you." Kendra's first reaction was shock. The last thing she expected was a call from the man who had humiliated her. "Why is he in the hospital?" she asked, her curiosity piqued despite herself. The nurse hesitated. "He was involved in an off-duty car accident. It was pretty serious." Part of Kendra wanted to hang up immediately. Another part remembered her mother's teachings about compassion. Against her better judgment, she found herself agreeing to visit him. Maybe it was a desire for closure. Maybe it was a sense of moral obligation. Whatever the reason, she cleared her schedule for the afternoon and drove to the hospital. Upon arrival, she was greeted by a nurse who led her through white corridors that smelled of antiseptic. They arrived at a small private room. Inside, she found Officer Barlow lying in bed, his leg in a cast, a bandage around his head. His face was pale, and he looked surprisingly vulnerable. He turned his head when he saw Kendra. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The tension was thick. Kendra broke the silence. "Why did you want to see me?" Barlow swallowed. His voice was raspy. "I don't have many people to talk to." Kendra remained by the doorway, uncertain whether to move closer. "What about your fellow officers, friends, family?" He let out a bitter laugh, wincing as pain shot through his body. "They're not exactly lining up to visit me. After everything that happened, well, you saw the news. I'm on administrative leave. My ex-wife won't let me see my daughter because of the negative press. My own colleagues have distanced themselves to avoid the controversy. And now this accident." Kendra's eyes flicked to the monitors beeping softly by his bedside. She noticed the corner of the room, where a single get-well-soon balloon floated, half deflated. "So, what does this have to do with me?" she asked quietly. He breathed in, trying to gather his thoughts. "Look, I messed up. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of. I've been angry. At my family situation, at my finances, at everything. I took it out on people who didn't deserve it. And you—" He paused, clearing his throat. "You didn't deserve it." Kendra felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Pity, anger, cautious empathy. She took a step closer, folding her arms. "Why are you telling me this now?" Barlow looked away. "Because I might lose everything. The lawsuit, the scrutiny, my medical bills. I'm probably not going to be a cop much longer. And even though you have every right to hate me, I wanted to say I'm sorry." Kendra inhaled deeply. She could see the raw pain in his eyes, the desperation. She thought of all the people he must have wronged in his career. Still, an apology was not the same as accountability. "I appreciate that, but an apology doesn't erase the trauma you've caused me or others." He nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "I know, if I could go back I'd do it differently, but I can't." He glanced at a neatly folded paper on the bedside table. "I wrote a letter, not just to you, but to the department and the city council, admitting what I did and calling for reforms. It's the least I can do." Kendra watched him, unsure how to react. Part of her wanted to remain steeled, to reject him outright. Another part recognized that real change sometimes starts with a single act of contrition. Without a word, she picked up the paper. It was a handwritten letter scrawled with unsteady penmanship. She read a few lines. "I, Officer Timothy Barlow, admit that my actions against Ms. Wellington were driven by suspicion that had no basis. I hope my testimony can lead to meaningful police reforms." Her hands trembled slightly as she put the letter down. "If you're serious about this," she began, her voice steady, "then I hope you'll testify in court too." He nodded. "I will. I promise." Kendra lingered a moment longer. She looked at him, seeing not just the man who harassed her, but a broken individual grappling with his own failures. She didn't forgive him entirely, but something shifted. A corner of her anger softened. "Get well," she said simply, turning to leave. Outside in the hallway, she paused, leaning against the wall. Her mind raced. Should she trust his sudden change of heart? Was it just desperation to reduce the consequences he faced? Regardless, his letter could be a powerful piece of evidence in pushing for the reforms she was fighting for. Days later, Barlow's letter made headlines. He had sent copies to the local newspapers, the police department, and city officials. The letter sparked a renewed wave of debate about racial profiling, with many calling for immediate action. The police union, fearing a PR disaster, distanced itself from Barlow, but some younger officers secretly lauded his honesty, saying it was the first step to fixing a flawed system. Kendra, meanwhile, pressed forward with her lawsuit, incorporating Barlow's admissions into the legal arguments. She rallied community leaders, activists, and fellow philanthropists, building a coalition dedicated to structural reforms. For the first time in a long while, it felt like a genuine tipping point. In the months that followed, the City Council approved funding for mandatory bias training and body cams for all officers. They also agreed to create a civilian oversight board to review complaints. National media hailed it as a major victory for police reform advocates. Kendra received invitations to speak at universities and panels, highlighting the intersection of technology, social justice, and leadership. As for Barlow, he was officially dismissed from the force. His medical recovery was slow, and he faced a barrage of civil suits beyond Kendra's, including older complaints that had been reopened. Yet, part of the agreement included his sworn testimony and cooperation in future investigations. Kendra never fully reconciled with him, but she did acknowledge that his confession was a turning point, perhaps even a form of karmic debt repaid. Months rolled on, and Kendra's life was busier than ever. Synergy Link continued to flourish, partnering with entertainment studios and multinational corporations alike. The Wellington Foundation expanded its reach, launching initiatives not only in tech education, but also in social justice and community outreach. Kendra herself became an even more prominent figure, a billionaire philanthropist, a tech visionary, and now an advocate for fair policing practices. Her estate in the hills became a sanctuary, a place where she could reflect on her journey. Sometimes she'd stand on her balcony at dusk, gazing at the shimmering city lights below, remembering the fear and humiliation of that traffic stop. It was a reminder of how far she'd come, and how far society still had to go. She had turned her personal ordeal into a catalyst for wider change, one she hoped would benefit countless others. The city of Beverly Hills, once associated primarily with glamour and exclusivity, began to embrace a new identity, one that included open dialogue about race and law enforcement. Community forums were held regularly, inviting residents to share concerns and suggestions. The new Civilian Oversight Board received hundreds of complaints, many of which were investigated with newfound transparency. Trust in the police was far from fully restored, but steps had been taken in the right direction. One day, Kendra received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a thank you note from the mother of a young black teen who had been wrongfully arrested the year before. Because of the new reforms, his case was reviewed and the charges were dropped. He was now heading to college on a scholarship. The mother wrote, "Thank you for using your voice, your resources, and your influence to help people like us. If not for your courage, my son might not have a second chance." Kendra felt tears prick her eyes. That simple note encapsulated everything she'd hoped to achieve. Her ordeal had not been in vain. It had sparked tangible change in at least one life, likely more. In a world of cynicism and systemic challenges, moments like these fueled her determination to continue the fight for justice and equality. Looking back, she knew her mother would be proud. A single experience of discrimination could have broken her spirit, but instead she used it to empower herself and others. She remembered her mother's words, "If you're building something special, you go out and change the world." In her own way, that was exactly what she was doing. Though the road ahead remained long and fraught with challenges, Kendra Wellington stood ready, her resolve unshakable. She was proof that no matter how high you rise, you can still be brought down by ignorance, but you can also rise above it with strength and conviction. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma has a way of finding those who most deserve it, giving them a chance, if they're willing, to break the cycle of harm and move toward redemption. Kendra's story reminds us all that true power isn't just about personal success. It's about using your influence to help create a fairer world. It's a testament to standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable or frightening, and channeling personal pain into collective progress. Her legacy extends beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. She's become a champion for justice, equality, and reform. If this story moved you or made you think differently about how power can be used for good, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with friends, family, and anyone who needs a spark of inspiration. Hit that like button to show your support, and if you want to be part of more stories that explore courage, hope, and transformation, go ahead and subscribe. Join our community of changemakers, and let's stand together for a world where everyone is seen, heard, and valued.